Welcome back to History 121, History of the United States since the American Civil War. I want to follow up on our lecture last time where I spoke about the populists, and I want to talk about the progressives, and I want to give them the frame of Woodrow Wilson's America, because it's important to understand that at the end of the 19th century and going into the early 20th century, we have a real push for change in America. Obviously, we've talked about the populists, we've talked about this bottom-up sense of people seeking change in American society or American government, but we also have others who want to see those aspects change as well, and we're going to talk about them today. The election of 1912 is going to come down to what we call an election of ideas, or a war of ideals in what this country is supposed to be. William Howard Taft is coming off of his term as president. He's a Republican president. He had followed on the coattails of Teddy Roosevelt into office. He had been Teddy Roosevelt's vice president. To be honest, as much as we talk about Roosevelt as a reformer, Taft did more reforms than Roosevelt did. He really pushed more legislation through to try and change monopolies and business situations than Roosevelt did. However, Roosevelt doesn't think he's doing a good enough job. We like this brash, brusque picture of Teddy Roosevelt bully and acting in that manner. He's kind of egomaniacal. Down to brass tacks, Teddy Roosevelt thinks that he's the best person for every job. And so when his hand-picked predecessor isn't doing the work that he wanted him to do, Roosevelt will throw his hat back in the ring for a third term as president if the head of his own party, called the Bull Moose Party, coming from the fact that when he's asked, well, how are you feeling? Is your health good enough to run? Are you fit enough to run, young enough to run? He goes, I'm as healthy as a bull moose, which in effect is going to be proven during the election of 1912 when someone will try to assassinate Roosevelt at the Minnesota State Fair, and the bullet will be stopped by his folded over speech, which is in the breast pocket of his jacket, and his eyeglass case. That will only slow down the bullet. The bullet will enter his chest, and Roosevelt will give a full political campaign speech while bleeding from an assassin's wound, which you have a hard time saying he's not healthy or he's not physically capable of doing something when you can give a campaign speech with a bullet in your chest. But the only reason that Roosevelt runs, honestly, is because he feels that Taft isn't doing the right type of work. He isn't doing what he wants him to do. So Roosevelt is literally like, get out of my way, I'm going to take over again. Opposing the Republican and the Bull Moose are going to be Woodrow Wilson, a reform-minded progressive Democrat, and Eugene V. Debs, a socialist. And when I mean Debs is a socialist, he is actually a dyed-in-the-wool socialist running for president of the United States. He feels that capitalism and democracy have failed the average man, that we live in a plutocracy, that we live in an era when the government is run for the rich, by the rich. Real honest-to-God socialism. Wilson is a quiet man. He is from Virginia. He is born, I want to say, right before or at the... He is born at a period of time where he actually has memories of the end of the Civil War. He has memories of Reconstruction in Virginia and in the South. As I mentioned, he's a Southerner. He has very strong Southern beliefs. We have some people today who have examined his beliefs and believe that he is an outright racist, which they're probably right. but he's a progressive. He's an intellectual. He actually has a PhD in history. He teaches at Rutgers, and he has been asked to. New Jersey has always had a reputation for corruption, even going back into the early 20th century. And as such, the Democrats of New Jersey ask Wilson to run as their candidate, and expecting that they'll have this Rutgers academic under their thumb, that they'll promise him things, that they'll listen to him and do what he wants, but once he's elected, he'll be a man easy to control in their office. He'll be elected president in 1912, or pardon me, I'm stepping forward too much. He'll win the election for the governor of New Jersey, and then he will be uncontrollable by the corrupt Democratic Party. He'll actually go in and clean up New Jersey politics and clean up New Jersey government and implement some very progressive reforms and defy anybody that tries to stop him. And so the National Democratic Party looks at this. They see a Southern man with a PhD who has experience running colleges, major national universities, as well as states, and they say, let's use Wilson as our candidate. They'll run him, and honestly, Wilson will win because Roosevelt splits the Republican Party. Wilson will be the first Southerner elected president since before the Civil War. He'll be only one of two Democrats that have served as president since 1860. So we see this as a conservative Southern victory by the Democratic Party. Now, as I've mentioned, Roosevelt's a progressive. What's a progressive? We've already talked about populism. In essence, it's the difference between bottom-up movements for reform and top-down movements for reform. Bottom-up movements for reform are the populists. It's the everyday man, the grassroots movement that says, hey, we want these reforms, and we're going to get them, and no matter who we have to get elected, we're going to take things into our own hands. Whereas we have progressives who are educated leaders who see a need for reform in society and look for governmental ways to implement those means, and they're implementing very educated, very well thought out programs. They're looking to make these reforms in a world that, maybe they don't understand that they need these reforms, but by God, we look at this and we have great plans for how these things are going to be put forward. They're the experts putting in changes. We're talking college professors, college leaders, scientists, people who have studied industry, people who have studied efficiency, and they're looking to implement means of it to make society and our government run in the most efficient means possible. And like I said, it's all top-down reforms. What the progressives are looking for during the late 19th and very early 20th century is they want to implement several types of political reforms. They see a political system that is prone to corruption or prone to one-party control. And let's face it, as I said, Wilson is only the second Democrat since the beginning of the Civil War to be elected president. So they're looking for means of making politics be more fair in the United States. So what they want to do is they want to implement the primary system. In essence, prior to this, politics, the local party picked who was going to run for certain offices. Let's say that you're running for the mayor of Sioux Falls in 1860 as a Republican. Well, that means you needed to have spent time as sheriff or as dog catcher or as alderman. You needed to have worked your way up to that position and in the eyes of your fellow Republicans. With the primary system, you're very familiar with the primary system. It's what we have today. You want to be governor of South Dakota? All right, well, the primary's coming up this fall. We're going to have 3 Democrats run against each other. We're going to have 3 Republicans run against each other. And before the general election, we'll have a primary election where we determine who the people will determine who the Democrat is going to be and who the Republican will be in their own separate party elections. We also see progressives wanting to put initiatives and referendums in the hand of the people. Essentially, prior to this, you could send a letter to a lawmaker saying, well, here's a petition with 1,000 signatures. We want you to try and put forward legislation to make X a law or Y a law. And the legislator could do it or he could ignore it, to be perfectly honest. And a lot of times these get ignored. So with the power of the initiative and the referendum, the progressives want to give more political power and lawmaking decisions to the individuals. But this is going to come with a choice, with kind of a cost. We're going to actually have voter registration now. If you want to vote, you have to sign up. But this makes sure that people meet the parameters of voting. Is it going to eliminate voter fraud? Not entirely, not at first. Other means will have to come in later on. But this is our first attempt to actually enumerate who can and who cannot vote. We're going to see calls for the recall. Let's say we elect somebody governor and they're doing a horrible job, or they've committed crimes, they've been accused of certain acts. The people of a state can demand the recall of their governor or an elected official to have them replaced. Great example of this is back in the 90s. This happened in California. I believe it was Pete Wilson was governor of California. The people felt that he was not representing their wishes. He was not doing the job that they wanted. So they actually mounted a successful recall campaign to have him removed from the governorship, and then they had a new election for governor to replace him. That would not be possible without progressive politics of the early 20th century. We also see a desire for the direct election of senators. This will be done and established through the 17th Amendment. What's important about this is, if you remember, before the primary, the local Republican Party would determine who would be mayor, who would be an alderman, or the state Democratic Party would determine who would be the governor or who would go to the legislature. Prior to the 17th Amendment, senators were determined by the state legislature. So that meant that whatever party was in charge of the legislature would send or determine who would be the senators for your state. You ended up with senators that in some states were senators for 30 and 40 years, and yes, I know we have that situation still. They were picked by the party. They were picked for party loyalty. They were picked by the party for any number of reasons, but the people had no say in who represented them on a senatorial level. Under the original Constitution, under the original wishes of the Founding Fathers, that may have been to implemented for any number of reasons, including level of education, level of power by the people sent to the Senate. It ends up being horribly abused. So we'll see a successful move for the 17th Amendment under the progressive political wing. Well, we're also going to see politically, we're going to see progressive efforts for prohibition. These will eventually join up with the populist movements for prohibition. We'll also see the rise of a more vocal women's suffrage movement. Women's suffrage had been around since the 1840s. Remember, this is the call for women to have the right to vote. The progressives will be the champions for women's political rights in the early 20th century. If you remember what I said, one of the things that we really see a call for in the early 20th century is that society and government operate with efficiency. what we have here, we have something that what's going to best implement this idea and best be recognized for this idea is what we call the Wisconsin idea. This is Fighting Bob LaFollette. He is governor and then senator from the state of Wisconsin. He's a Democrat, but he's kind of borderline socialist. And honestly, we'll have a very successful period of socialist politics during this time in Wisconsin based on the ideas of the Socialist Party and the goals that they want to achieve with the representation and rights for the average individual. LaFollette is going to push the Wisconsin state government to have this idea called the Wisconsin idea go into effect. Government and governmental institutions and educational institutions are going to work together to make sure that not just that we have the best education system, but that we have the best form of state government going forward. In essence, university educators are going to be state employees. If you're going to teach in the state of Wisconsin, if you're going to teach history in the state of Wisconsin, we need you to also teach history in such a way that it's going to help the people of the state of Wisconsin. What does history have to say about these topics, about these ideas? How can we use history? That's one vague idea, but the sciences, especially agricultural sciences, chemistry, physics, if you're going to be working to teach in the state of Wisconsin, you're going to produce research that helps the people of the state of Wisconsin. It means that education is going to be much more than just simply a stepping stone for school or for a job. It means the people that are charged with giving the education to the young are also going to be charged with doing research to keep up on their ideas, to keep active in their research field so that they're on the cutting edge of their topics, and which is going to help maintain their familiarity with the topics that they research. But it's also going to mean that Wisconsin is going to be a model for the universities doing good works for the people. We're going to see ideas like workers' compensation come out of the Wisconsin idea, that we'll have legislators and university officials will work together to say that, you know, it's not right that a person labors all their life in a factory, and if they're injured or become sick because of their work environment, that we just simply cast them off and do nothing to help them, that we need to have workers' compensation insurance to pay for any injuries that they might accrue. Taxation needs to be progressive. It needs to be based on your income and not the same taxes paid by everybody. And those taxes need to be used by the state for the good of the people, be it paying for education, paying for roads, paying for bridges, etc. Essentially, efficiency in the Wisconsin idea can be summed up that the will of the people shall be the law of the land, as long as it's implemented in a progressive manner and managed by the intelligent, well-educated, well-meaning legislators and experts at the top of the ladder. So that's the first part of this lecture. I want to thank you very much for your attention. I will get this posted up. We'll finish this topic hopefully next time. But what we're going to start doing is moving towards the First World War and Wilson's role in getting us into the First World War. So thank you very much for your attention and have a great day.